Every time you approach the altar to receive Holy Communion, you're doing far more than performing a simple religious ritual. You are opening a powerful spiritual doorway, connecting your soul directly to the heart of Christ. But what most people don't realize is that receiving communion without properly confessing certain hidden sins can place your soul in grave spiritual danger. Saints and mystics throughout history, especially Padre Pio, have urgently warned that communion received in sin does not bring grace, but rather spiritual harm and profound suffering. If you've ever felt unexplained discomfort, anxiety, or spiritual emptiness after communion, it may be a clear spiritual warning that hidden sins are weighing heavily on your soul. Padre Pio vividly described receiving communion unworthily as crucifying Christ within your own soul. The consequences are severe, yet many continue to ignore this profound spiritual truth. In this video, you'll discover the 12 hidden sins you must confess urgently before receiving communion. These sins, often overlooked or underestimated, have been revealed by Padre Pio and other spiritual visionaries as spiritually dangerous to your soul's eternal destiny. By watching until the end, you'll learn exactly what these sins are and how confessing them can profoundly transform your spiritual life, bringing inner peace, true freedom, and a renewed relationship with God. This revelation is not a coincidence. If you're here now, it's a divine signal, a call from God to liberate your soul from hidden dangers before it's too late. Don't let fear or hesitation prevent you from experiencing the true power and beauty of communion as it was intended. The moment to free your soul from these dangerous spiritual chains is now. Communion is not merely symbolic. It is profoundly spiritual, a divine moment when your soul directly encounters the living presence of Christ himself. Many people approach this sacred moment casually, unaware of the immense spiritual force at play each time they receive the Eucharist. But saints and mystics like Padre Pio have revealed that the Eucharist holds a hidden spiritual power that can either uplift or profoundly harm your soul, depending entirely on the state of your heart when you receive it. Padre Pio often emphasized that the Eucharist is the deepest possible union a human soul can have with God on earth. He described communion as an intimate spiritual marriage, where your soul literally absorbs Christ's divine essence. Imagine it. At the moment of communion, heaven and earth merge within your heart. This divine union grants you extraordinary graces, inner peace, spiritual healing, emotional clarity, and even physical blessings. Yet, this powerful union comes with solemn spiritual responsibility. Padre Pio famously warned, receiving communion unworthily is spiritually destructive. Instead of inviting grace into your heart, you open your soul to darkness and profound suffering. This warning may sound severe, but it reveals a deep spiritual truth often forgotten today. Why is communion spiritually dangerous if received improperly? Because in communion, Christ's purity meets directly with your soul's current spiritual state. If your heart is pure, humble, and fully reconciled through confession, communion becomes an extraordinary source of divine grace, healing, and renewal. It fills your soul with heavenly peace, transforming you deeply from within. However, if hidden sins linger unconfessed, communion becomes spiritually hazardous. Instead of grace, you unknowingly invite spiritual turmoil into your soul. Saints and visionaries have confirmed that souls receiving communion in a state of serious sin experience emotional instability, anxiety, inexplicable inner darkness, and even persistent spiritual dryness. Padre Pio explained clearly, the Eucharist magnifies whatever lies hidden in your heart. Purity attracts grace. Hidden sins attract spiritual distress. Padre Pio frequently shared powerful spiritual insights through real-life stories. One of these involved a man who regularly attended Mass and received communion, yet suffered continuous spiritual torment and mysterious physical ailments. No doctor could identify the cause. When he finally approached Padre Pio seeking relief, the saint asked one simple, powerful question: "Have you hidden sins in confession while continuing to receive communion?" Shocked, the man admitted to omitting sins he considered insignificant. Padre Pio firmly replied, "Every unworthy communion has wounded your soul. Confess sincerely, and Christ's grace will heal you." Following a complete confession, the man's spiritual torment ceased instantly, and his physical ailments disappeared shortly afterward. This story dramatically demonstrates communion's hidden spiritual power and reveals why receiving it requires sincere preparation. The Eucharist is not merely symbolic bread. It is spiritually alive, a divine fire that both purifies and reveals the hidden truths within your soul. Many saints, from Padre Pio to Saint Faustina, affirmed that communion is a miraculous source of divine strength when received properly. But they also urgently warn about the severe spiritual risks if hidden sins remain unconfessed. The Eucharist was given as a divine gift, not to be feared, but deeply respected. Your spiritual well-being depends on understanding this hidden truth clearly and preparing your heart sincerely before approaching the sacred altar. Now that you deeply understand the immense spiritual power behind communion, it's essential that you recognize the secret dangers of receiving it in sin, dangers clearly warned about by Padre Pio. In the next moments, you will learn exactly how hidden sins silently damage your soul every time you partake unworthily, and more importantly, what sins must urgently be confessed before receiving communion again. Receiving communion with hidden, unconfessed sins is more spiritually dangerous than most people imagine. Saints like Padre Pio were crystal clear about this. Communion taken unworthily isn't just ineffective, it actively wounds the soul, creating spiritual turmoil that manifests subtly in everyday life. Padre Pio warned repeatedly about the severe consequences that follow receiving communion in a state of sin. To him, each unworthy communion was like a hidden spiritual poison, slowly damaging your soul from within. The hidden danger, he explained, lies precisely in its subtlety. Many people who partake unworthily often experience vague spiritual discomfort, anxiety, unexplained sadness, or deep inner emptiness, yet rarely realize that these symptoms come directly from spiritual damage caused by unworthy communion. One powerful story Padre Pio shared illustrates this vividly. A young woman approached him, deeply troubled by chronic anxiety, depression, and spiritual emptiness. She regularly attended Mass and received communion, yet felt spiritually disconnected, deeply unhappy, and physically weak. Doctors couldn't help, neither could prayer alone. When she met Padre Pio, he immediately discerned the cause of her suffering and asked, "Have you truly confessed everything before receiving communion?" Ashamed, she admitted she deliberately hid embarrassing sins, thinking them trivial or unimportant. Padre Pio compassionately explained, "Each hidden sin you failed to confess turned her communion into spiritual poison rather than divine medicine." After guiding her through a full and honest confession, Padre Pio gave her communion again, this time properly prepared. The transformation was immediate. Her anxiety vanished, depression lifted, and physical symptoms ceased entirely within days. This dramatic story confirms exactly what saints have taught for centuries. Communion unworthily received becomes spiritually harmful rather than healing. Why does communion become dangerous when received in sin? Because communion opens your soul directly to divine energy. If your soul is pure, communion nourishes it, creating inner peace and joy. But if your soul remains tainted with unconfessed sin, communion magnifies these hidden spiritual wounds, causing profound internal conflict. This hidden conflict manifests as emotional pain, anxiety, spiritual dryness, and even unexplained physical suffering. Padre Pio explained clearly, receiving communion unworthily is like drinking poison while expecting health. Your soul suffers deeply each time you do this. Many Catholics today unknowingly harm their spiritual lives by repeatedly taking communion casually, without genuine confession or sincere preparation. They experience persistent anxiety, spiritual emptiness, emotional instability, or even prolonged spiritual dryness, never realizing these symptoms are clear spiritual warnings signaling urgent need for sincere confession and repentance. If you sense something spiritually off after communion, or if you're struggling with unexplained emotional or physical ailments despite regularly attending Mass, this revelation from Padre Pio should speak directly to you. The spiritual damage caused by receiving communion in sin is both real and deeply harmful, but thankfully, it can be reversed immediately through sincere, heartfelt confession. Now you clearly see why saints warn urgently about unworthy communion. In the next crucial chapter, you'll discover exactly which 12 hidden sins you must urgently confess before your next communion, ensuring you receive grace rather than spiritual harm. According to Padre Pio and other profound spiritual authorities, certain hidden sins must absolutely be confessed before receiving communion. Ignoring them can cause subtle yet dangerous spiritual harm. Here are the 12 hidden sins you must urgently confess before approaching the altar again. 1. Unforgiveness. Holding on to resentment or bitterness toward anyone deeply blocks spiritual grace. Padre Pio emphasized, if you refuse to forgive, you close your heart entirely to God's forgiveness. 2. Constant gossip or slander. Habitually speaking negatively about others, even casually, contaminates your soul deeply. Each harmful word damages your spiritual connection to Christ during communion. 3. Habitual lying, even small lies. Repeatedly telling minor lies creates invisible spiritual wounds, compromising your integrity and distancing your soul from divine truth. 4. Secret envy. Privately envying others' successes or blessings, no matter how briefly, deeply corrupts your spiritual purity, weakening your soul's reception of divine grace. 5. Spiritual pride. Believing yourself spiritually superior to others or secretly judging their faith is a subtle yet grave sin. Padre Pio cautioned that pride blocks all grace during communion. 6. Deliberate impure thoughts. Accepting impure thoughts without resistance, even without action, pollutes your heart profoundly, preventing true spiritual intimacy with Christ. 7. Indifference to others' suffering. Ignoring or failing to respond compassionately to others' pain hardens your heart spiritually, severely limiting your soul's receptivity during communion. 8. Receiving communion routinely without devotion. Taking communion habitually without genuine devotion or reflection transforms a sacred act into an empty ritual, damaging your spiritual life significantly. 9. Internal anger or resentment. Holding anger or deep frustration internally, even without expressing it, silently corrupts your spiritual state, creating severe blockages to divine grace. 10. Spiritual laziness or neglect. Consciously neglecting your prayer life or spiritual growth severely weakens your soul, leaving it vulnerable and ill-prepared for communion's immense spiritual energy. 11. Concealing serious past sins. Hiding or omitting past serious sins intentionally in confession leaves your soul spiritually compromised, causing continual spiritual distress when receiving communion. 12. Subtle idolatry of worldly things. Prioritizing your career, wealth, or relationships, even subtly, above God creates hidden yet profound spiritual wounds. Padre Pio firmly warned against placing anything before God in your heart. Padre Pio frequently emphasized that clearly confessing these sins isn't about humiliation, it's about spiritual liberation. He insisted, only by fully confessing the hidden can your soul truly embrace the presence of Christ. Many believers who follow this guidance have described their spiritual lives as completely transformed, filled with newfound peace, joy, clarity, and deep inner healing. It's critical to approach your next confession intentionally, openly confessing these hidden sins. The Eucharist is meant to nourish, heal, and elevate your soul, not harm it. Confessing sincerely and completely allows you to experience the Eucharist as Christ intended, a pure, transformative union with His divine love and grace. Today, you've received a spiritual revelation that could dramatically shift your communion experience forever. Don't allow fear, pride, or hesitation to stop you from embracing this opportunity. Remember, communion is not just bread. It's Christ Himself, lovingly waiting to fully unite with your soul. Free your heart from these hidden dangers through honest confession and witness how profoundly your spiritual life changes. Next, you'll receive powerful final instructions and a heartfelt call to action designed to solidify this spiritual revelation in your heart forever. Now that you've learned about these 12 hidden sins revealed by Padre Pio, you're spiritually prepared to profoundly change your life. Communion isn't meant to cause spiritual harm, anxiety, or emptiness. It's designed to bring your soul the deepest peace, clarity, and grace imaginable. But it depends entirely upon your sincere confession and inner purity. Padre Pio's urgent message is clear: confess fully, and Christ Himself will fill you completely. Today is your chance to free your soul from these hidden dangers. Take immediate action by approaching your next confession openly, honestly, and courageously. Allow your soul to experience the profound spiritual healing and transformative grace Christ intended when He gave us communion. Your spiritual peace, joy, and freedom depend on it. If this message deeply resonated with your heart, I encourage you right now to share your thoughts below in the comments. Which hidden sin impacted you most deeply? Like and share this video urgently with someone else who needs this life-changing spiritual guidance. Subscribe to Beyond Yourself for more profound spiritual revelations designed to transform your heart and soul forever. May the powerful intercession of Padre Pio guide and protect your spiritual journey always.